Book 4, Section 1, Generosity, Extravagance, and Stinginess. Next in order, let us discuss generosity. It seems to be the mean in the sphere of material goods. A man is praised as generous neither for what he does on the battlefield, nor situations in which a person is praised as self-controlled, nor again in the making of judicial decisions. He is praised in matters involving the giving and taking of material goods, more particularly the giving. By material goods, we understand everything whose value is measured in money. There also exists in matters involving material goods extravagance and stinginess as excess and deficiencies. We attach the label of stinginess always to those who are more intent on material goods than they should be. The term extravagance, on the other hand, is sometimes used with wider implications when we call moral weaklings and people who spend their money in indulging themselves extravagant. They have so many vices all at once that they are regarded as the most worthless of all. But that is not proper usage, for extravagant denotes a person who has only one bad quality, namely that of wasting his property. A man ruined by his own doing is a hopeless case. Indeed, wasting one's poverty seems to be a kind of self-destruction, since poverty provides the means for living. This is therefore the sense in which we understand extravagance. This means for use. Things meant for use can be used well and badly, and wealth is a useful thing. Now any particular object is put to the best use by a man who possesses the virtue proper to that object. Accordingly, wealth will be put to best use by him who possesses the excellence proper to material goods, and that is the generous man. Use, we think, consists in spending and giving material goods, while taking and keeping them is more properly called possession. Therefore, a generous man is characterized rather by giving to the right people than by taking from the right and not taking from the wrong sources. For excellence consists in doing good rather than in having good done to one, and in performing noble actions rather than in not performing base ones. It is fairly obvious that giving implies doing good and acting nobly, and that taking implies having good done to one and not acting basely. Furthermore, we show gratitude to him who gives, not to him who does not take, and what is more, we praise him. Also, it is easier not to take than to give, for people are less liable to give away what belongs to them than not to take what is another's. Moreover, givers are called generous, whereas those who do not take are rather praised for their honesty and justice, not their generosity, and takers are not likely to be praised. Generous men are perhaps loved more than any other people who are loved for their excellence, for they are helpful, and their helpfulness consists in giving. Virtuous actions are noble and performed because they are noble. Accordingly, a generous man too will give, and give in the correct manner because that is noble. He will give to the right people, the right amount, at the right time, and do everything else that is implied in the correct giving. Moreover, it will give him pleasure to do so, or at least no pain. For to act in conformity with virtue is pleasant or painless, but certainly not painful. If he gives to the wrong people or for the wrong motive, and not because it is noble to give, he will not be called generous but something else. The same applies to a man who finds giving painful. He would prefer material goods to noble action, and that is not what marks a man as generous. Nor will a generous man take from the wrong source. That kind of taking is not a characteristic of a man who holds material goods in low esteem. He is not likely to make requests either. A person who does good is not one to accept good turns lightly. He will take them from the right source, from his own possessions, for example, not because it is noble to do so, but because it is necessary in order to have something to give. He will not, however, be careless of his personal possessions, since he wishes to use them as a means of helping others. He will not give to anybody and everybody so that he may have something to give to the right people at the right time and where it is noble to do so. Still, a generous man has a strong tendency to go to such excess in giving that he leaves too little for himself. For not to look out for himself is typical of a generous person. We speak of generosity relative to a person's property. For a generous act does not depend on the amount given, but on the characteristic of the giver, and this makes him give relative to his property. In other words, it is quite possible that a man who gives less is more generous if his gift comes from smaller resources. Those who have not accumulated their own property but have inherited it are thought to be more generous, not only because they have never experienced want, but also because everyone has a greater love for what he has produced himself, and as do parents and poets. A generous man does not get easily rich, inasmuch as he is not a taker or a keeper, but an open-handed spender who values material goods not for their own sake, but for the sake of giving. That is also why fortune is blamed when the most worthy individuals are the least wealthy, and not without reason. One cannot have material goods or anything else without devoting care to getting them. Still, a generous man will not give to the wrong people at the wrong time, and so forth. For if he did, his actions would no longer be dictated by generosity, and if he spent his money on the wrong things, he would have none to spend on the right ones. For as we have said, a man is generous who spends relative to his property and on the right objects. He who spends to excess is extravagant. Therefore, we do not call tyrants or absolute monarchs extravagant, for it seems the amounts they give and spend cannot very well be in excess of the amounts they possess. Now, since generosity is the mean in giving and taking material goods, a generous person will give and spend the right amounts on the right objects, in small and great matters alike, and he will derive pleasure from doing so. Also, he will take the right amounts from the right resources. For since the virtue is a mean both in giving and taking, he will do both in the proper manner. Honest taking goes with honest giving, and any other kind of taking is contrary to it. Now the practices that belong together are found in the same individual, while contrary practices obviously are not. If he should happen to spend his money in a manner other than proper and noble, he will feel pain, but moderately and in the right way, for it is a mark of virtue or excellence to feel pleasure and pain at the right objects and in the right way. Moreover, a generous man is easy to get along with in business matters, for he can be taken advantage of, since he sets no store by material goods, and since he feels more vexation at not having made proper expenditure than pain at having made the wrong one. He is not a man to Simonides' liking. Here, too, an extravagant man goes completely wrong. He feels neither pleasure nor pain at the right objects and in the right manner. This will become more apparent as we go on. As we have stated, that extravagance and stinginess are excess and deficiencies in two aspects. For example, in giving and taking, for we classify spending with giving. Extravagance is an excess in giving without taking, but it falls short in taking. Stinginess, on the other hand, is a deficiency in giving, and an excess in taking, but only in small matters. These two aspects of extravagance do not usually go together, for it is not easy for a person to give to all and to take from none. Private individuals soon exhaust their property by giving, and it is of private individuals that we think when we say that a person is extravagant. Still, a man who is extravagant in both senses is thought to be considerably superior to a stingy man. Age and poverty easily cure him, and he can attain the median state. He has the qualities requisite for a generous man. He gives and does not take, though he does neither rightly and well. If he were to acquire this practice by habit or by changing in some other way, he would be generous. He will then give to the right people and will not take from the wrong source. That is why he is not regarded as a bad character for excess in giving, and in not taking marks as a man is foolish, but not wicked or ignoble. A man who is extravagant in this fashion seems to be far superior to a stingy person, for the reasons mentioned, and also because he is helpful to many people, while a stingy man helps nobody, not even. However, most extravagant people, as we have pointed out, also take from the wrong sources and are in this respect stingy. They tend to take because they want to spend, but they are unable to do so with an open hand, since their own resources are soon exhausted. As a result, they are compelled to provide means from elsewhere. At the same time, their indifference to what is noble makes them take indiscriminately from anyone and every source. They have an appetite for giving no matter how or from what source. For that reason, their gifts are not even generous. Their gifts are not noble. They are not given because it is noble to give, and they are not given in the right way. On the contrary, persons of this sort sometimes make wealthy those who ought to be poor. They would give nothing to the people of respectable character, but much to those who flatter them or provide them with kinds of pleasure. Hence, most of them are also self-indulgent. They are easy spenders, and squander their money to indulge themselves. They incline toward pleasure, since their lives are not oriented toward what is noble. This is what an extravagant man will develop into if left unschooled. But if he receives proper care, he may attain the median, the right state. But stinginess is incurable and more deeply ingrained in men than extravagance. For we can see that old age and any kind of disability can make men stingy. Most people love to hang on to material goods rather than to give them away. Moreover, stinginess reaches far and takes many forms, for there seem to be many kinds of it. There are two aspects to stinginess: deficiency in giving and excess in taking. This means that it is not found in its entirety in all men, but sometimes divided so that some exceed in taking, while others fall short in giving. Names such as miser, niggard, penny pincher are all used of people who fall short in giving but do not covet or wish to take what belongs to another. Some are motivated by a sense of honesty and have scruples against acting basely, for there are those who seem, or at any rate profess, to keep what they have in order to avoid being compelled to do something base. Here belongs the skinflint and everyone like him who gets his name from his excessive reluctance to give anything. Some do not touch another man's property, though fear in the belief that it is not easy to take what belongs to another, while at the same time preventing others from taking what belongs to oneself. Accordingly, they are satisfied neither to take nor give. Still, others exceed in taking in that they take anything from any sorts. Such, for example, are those who follow occupations not fit for free men, such as pimps and all their oak, and usurers who lend small sums at high interest. All these people take from the wrong sources, and more they should. What they have in common is clearly the motive of profiteering, for they all endure notoriety for the sake of profit, and small profit at that. But those who take the wrong things from the wrong source on a large scale, such as tyrants who sack cities and plunder temples, are not called stingy or mean, but wicked, impious, and unjust. However, gamblers and highwaymen are classified as stingy and mean, for they are profiteers in that they both ply their trade and endure notoriety for the sake of profit, the one taking the greatest risk to get booty, and the other to make profit at the expense of his friends to whom he ought to give. Now, since both wish to gain profit from the wrong sources, they are profiteers, and all such ways of taking are stingy and mean. It is with good reason that stinginess is said to be the opposite of generosity. For not only is it a greater evil than extravagance, but people are more prone to go wrong in following it than in following extravagance, as we have described it. So much for generosity and the vices opposed to it. Section 2. Magnificence, vulgarity, and niggardliness. It seems logical to discuss magnificence. Next, for it, too, is evidently a virtue concerned with material goods. However, unlike generosity, which covers all actions involving material goods, magnificence is confined to those that involve spending, but in these it surpasses generosity in scale. For as the very name suggests, it is a suitable expenditure on a grand scale. Now, a scale is relative. The expense of equipping a trireme is not the same as that of heading a sacred embassy. What is suitable is then relative to the person and circumstances and the object. A man who, like the proverbial "to many a wanderer I did give," spends appropriate amounts on significant or only moderately important occasions is not called magnificent. But he is if he does so on important occasions. A magnificent man is generous, but that does not mean that a generous man is magnificent. The deficiency of this characteristic is called niggardliness, and its excess is vulgarity, gaudiness, and the like. It is an excess that does not consist in too great an amount spent on a proper object, but in putting on a showy display on the wrong occasion and in the wrong manner. We shall discuss them later. A magnificent man is like a skilled artist. He has the capacity to observe what is suitable and to spend large sums with good taste. For as we said at the outset, a characteristic is defined by its activities and its objects. Therefore, the expenses of a magnificent man are great and suitable, and so are, consequently, the results which he produces. For only in this way will the expenditure be great and suited to the result. Accordingly, a result must be worth the expense, and the expense worth the result, or even exceed the result. A magnificent man will spend amounts of this kind because it is noble to do so. For this motive is common to all of the virtues. Moreover, he will spend with pleasure and with a free hand, for exact bookkeeping is niggardly. He will try to find out how to achieve the most noble and suitable result, rather than how much it will cost him and how it can be done most cheaply. Therefore, a magnificent man will necessarily also be generous. A generous man too will spend the right amount in the right manner, but in spending the right amount in the right manner, the sphere of generosity, the grand, of a magnificent man, his greatness, will come to the fore. At the same expense he will achieve a more magnificent result. For the excellence of a possession is not the same as the excellence of a result achieved. The most valued possession is the most costly, such as gold, but the most valued achievement or result is the one that is great and noble. To look at it will be to admire it, and what is magnificent is admirable. In other words, the excellence or virtue of a of a result achieved, i.e., its magnificence, consists in greatness. Magnificence involves expenditures which we call honorable, e.g., expenditures on the worship of the gods, votive offerings, buildings, and sacrifices. And similarly, on the various forms of worship, the lesser divinities, and on public enterprises, which people ambitiously vie with one another to undertake, as for example, when they think they should equip a chorus, or a trireme, or give a feast for the city in a brilliant fashion. But in all these cases, as we have said, we must also take account of who the agent is and what his resources are. For the expenditure must be in keeping with that and must be suited not only to the result achieved, but also to the spender. That is why a poor man is unlikely to be magnificent, for he does not have the means for a suitable expenditure of large sums. If he tries to spend large sums, he is a fool, for he spends more than he can afford or ought to spend, whereas virtuous spending is right spending. But such expenditures is suited to persons who have the requisite means by either by dint of their own effort or from their ancestors or their connections. It is suited to persons of high birth and reputation and so forth, since all these qualities carry greatness and prestige. Such a man above all is magnificent, and as we have said, magnificence consists in expenditures of this kind, for they are the greatest and most honorable. In private affairs, magnificence is shown in those expenditures which are made only once, e.g., a wedding and the like, and anything of interest to the whole city or to the eminent people, and also in receiving and taking leave of foreign guests, and in exchanging gifts. For a man is magnificent not when he spends on himself, but when he spends for the common good. There is a similarity between gifts and votive offerings. It is also typical of a magnificent man to flourish his house commensurate with his wealth, for it too is a kind of ornament, and to prefer spending his money on works that endure, since they are the noblest. In each particular case he will spend an amount suited to the occasion. For the same thing is not fit for both gods and men. For what suits a temple does not suit a tomb. Now, the greatness of an expenditure depends on its kind. The most magnificent absolutely is great expenditure on a great object. The most magnificent in a particular case is great expenditure for that particular object. Moreover, greatness in the result achieved is different from greatness in expenditure. The most beautiful ball or oil flask is magnificent as a gift for a child, though its price is small and far from generous. From all this, it follows that a magnificent man is characterized by achieving his result of whatever kind they may be, magnificently, for such results cannot easily be surpassed and in a manner worth the expenditure. Such, then, is the magnificent man. His opposite on the side of excess is the vulgar man who, as we said, exceeds in spending more money than he should. He spends much where small expenditures are called for and makes an improper show of himself. He gives a dinner to his club on the scale of a wedding banquet, and when he defrays the expenses of a comic chorus, he makes them enter the theatre in purple as they do so at Megara. He will do all kinds of similar things, not for a noble motive, but to show off his wealth, and in the belief that he will be admired for doing so. Where he ought to spend much money, he spends little, and where little, he spends much. A niggardly person, on the other hand, will fall short in every aspect. After spending tremendous sums, he will for a trifle spoil the beauty of his achievement. In everything he does, he will hesitate and try to find ways of economizing. He will grumble about spending the little that he does, thinking that he is doing everything on a greater scale than he ought. Accordingly, these characteristics are vices, yet they do not bring reproach upon a person, because they are neither harmful to one's neighbor nor excessively unseemly. Section 3. High-mindedness, pettiness, and vanity. High-mindedness, as its very name suggests, seems to be concerned with great and lofty matters. Let us take the nature of these matters as the first point of our discussion. It makes no difference whether we investigate the characteristic or the man who is characterized by it. A man is regarded as high-minded when he thinks he deserves great things, and actually is a fool, and no man, in so far as he is virtuous, is either foolish or senseless. This, then, is the description of a high-minded man. A person who deserves little and thinks he deserves little is not high-minded, but is a man who knows his limitations. For high-mindedness implies greatness, just as beauty implies stature and body. Small people may have charm and proportion, but not beauty. A man who thinks he deserves great things, but does not deserve them, is vain, though not everybody who overestimates himself is vain. One who underestimates himself is small-minded, regardless of whether his actual worth is great or moderate, or whether it is small and he thinks that it is smaller still. A man of great deserts, it would seem, is most liable to be small-minded, for what would he do if his deserts were not as great as they are? Thus, measured by the standard of greatness, and the high-minded man is an extreme, but by the standard of what is right, he occupies the median, for his claims correspond to his deserts, whereas the others exceed or fall short. Accordingly, if a high-minded man thinks he deserves and actually does deserve great things, especially the greatness, there is one matter that will be his major concern. Deserts is a relative term that refers to external goods, and as the greatest external good, we may posit that which we pay as a tribute to the gods, for which eminent people strive most, and which is the prize for the noblest achievements. Honor fits that description, for it is the greatest of external goods. Consequently, it is in matters of honor and dishonor that a high-minded man has the right attitude. It is an obvious fact, and need not be argued, that the high-minded are concerned with honor, for they regard themselves as worthy of honor above all else, but of an honor that they deserve. A small-minded man falls short both in view of his own deserts and in relation to the claims of a high-minded person, while a vain man exceeds his own deserts but does not exceed at the high-minded. This means that the high-minded man, inasmuch as he deserves what is greatest, is the best. For the deserts of the better man are always greater, and those of the best man the greatest. It follows that a truly high-minded man must be good, and what is great in each virtue would seem to be the mark of a high-minded person. It would be quite out of character for him to run away in a battle with arms swinging or to do the wrong to anyone. For what motive does he have to act basely, he to whom nothing is great? If we were to examine his qualities one by one, we should see the utter absurdity of thinking of a high-minded man as being anything but good. If he were base, he would not even deserve honor, for honor is the prize of excellence and virtue, and it is reserved as a tribute to the good. High-mindedness, thus, is the crown, as it were, of the virtues. It magnifies them, and it cannot exist without them. Therefore it is hard to be truly high-minded, and in fact impossible, without goodness and nobility. A high-minded man is then primarily concerned with honor and dishonor. From great honors and those that good men confer upon him, he will derive a moderate amount of pleasure, convinced that he is only getting what is properly his or even less. For no honor can be worthy of perfect virtue, yet he will accept it, because they have no greater tribute to pay to him. But he will utterly despise honors conferred by ordinary people, and on trivial grounds, for that is not what he deserves. Similarly, he will despise dishonor, for no dishonor can be justified in this case. A high-minded man, as we have stated, is concerned primarily with honors, but he will of course also have a moderate attitude toward wealth, power, and every manner of good or bad luck that may befall him. He will not be overjoyed when his luck is good, nor will bad luck be very painful to him. For even toward honor, his attitude is that it is not of the greatest moment. Power and wealth are desirable for the honor they bring. At any rate, those who have them to wish to gain honor through them. But a person who attaches little importance even to honor will also attach little importance to power and wealth. As a result, he is graded as haughty. Gifts of fortune, it is believed, also contribute to high-mindedness. Men of noble birth, of power, or of wealth are as regarded as worthy of honor, since they occupy a superior position. And whatever is superior in goodness is held in greater honor. That is why the gifts of fortune make men more high-minded, for they are honored by some people for having them. But in truth, it is the good man alone that ought to be honored, though a man who has both excellent and good fortune is regarded as still more worthy of honor. Whoever possesses the goods of fortune without possessing excellence or virtue is not justified in claiming great deserts for himself, nor is it correct to call him high-minded, for neither is possible without perfect virtue. Their good fortune notwithstanding, such people become haughty and arrogant, for without virtue it is not easy to bear the gifts of fortune gracefully. Unable to bear them and considering themselves superior, they look down upon others, while they themselves do whatever they please. They imitate the high-minded man wherever they can, but they are not really like him. Thus they look down upon others, but they do not act in conformity with excellence. A high-minded person is justified in looking down upon others, for he has the right opinion of them. But the common run of people do so without rhyme or reason. A high-minded man does not take small risks, and since there are only a few things which he honors, he is not even fond of risks. But he will face great risks, and in the midst of them he will not spare his life, aware that life at any cost is not worth having. He is a kind of man who will do good, but who is ashamed to accept a good turn, because the former marks of a man as superior, the latter as inferior. Moreover, he will requite good with a greater good, for in this way he will not only repay the original benefactor, but put him in his debt at the same time by making him the recipient of an added benefit. The high-minded also seem to remember the good turns they have done, but not those who have received. For the good recipient is inferior to the benefactor, whereas a high-minded man wishes to be superior. They listen with pleasure to what good they have done, but with displeasure to what good they have received. That is apparently why Thetis does not mention the good turns she had done to Zeus, and why the Spartans did not mention theirs to the Athenians, but only the good they had received. It is further typical of a high-minded man not to ask for any favors, or only reluctantly, but to offer aid readily. He will show his stature in his relations with men of eminence and fortune, but will be unassuming toward those of moderate means. For to be superior to the former is difficult and dignified, but superiority over the latter is easy. Furthermore, there is nothing ignoble in asserting one's dignity among the great. but to do so among the lower classes is just as crude to assert one's strength against an invalid. He will not go in for pursuits that the common people value, nor for those in which the first place belongs to others. He is slow to act and procrastinates, except when some great honor or achievement is at stake. His actions are few, but they are great and distinguished. He must be open in hate and open in love, for to hide one's feelings and to care for more for the opinion of others than for truth is a sign of timidity. He speaks and acts openly, since he looks down upon others and his speech is free and truthful. When he deliberately depreciates himself in addressing the common run of people, he cannot adjust his life to another except a friend, for to do so is slavish. That is, by the way, why all flatterers are servile and people from the lower classes are flatterers. He is not given to admiration, for nothing is great to him. He bears no grudges, for it is not typical of a high-minded man to have a long memory, especially for wrongs, but rather to overlook them. He is not a gossip, for he will talk neither about himself nor about others, since he is not interested in hearing himself praised or others run down. Nor again is he given to praise, and for the same reason he does not speak evil of others, not even of his enemies, except to scorn them. When he encounters misfortunes that are unavoidable or insignificant, he will not lament and ask for help. That kind of attitude belongs to someone who takes such matters seriously. He is a person who will rather possess beautiful and profitless objects than objects which are profitable and useful, for they mark him as more as self-sufficient. Further, we think of a slow gait as a characteristic of a high-minded man, a deep voice, and a deliberate way of speaking. For a man who takes few things serious is unlikely to be in a hurry, and a person who regards nothing as great is not one to be excitable. But a shrill voice and a swift gait are due to hurry and excitement. Such, then, is the high-minded man. A man who falls short is small-minded, and one who exceeds is vain. Now here, too, these people are not considered to be bad, for they are not evildoers, but only mistaken. For a small-minded man deprives himself of the good he deserves. What seems to be bad about him is due to the fact that he does not think he deserves good things, and that he does not know himself. If he did, he would desire what he deserves, especially since it is good. It is not that such people are regarded as foolish, but rather that they are looked upon as retiring. However, a reputation of this sort seems to make them even worse. For while any given kind of man strives to get what he deserves, these people keep aloof even from the noble actions and pursuits and from external goods as well, because they consider themselves undeserving. Vain people, on the other hand, are fools and do not know themselves, and they show it openly. They take in hand honorable enterprises of which they are not worthy, and then they are found out. They deck themselves out with clothes and showy gear and that sort of thing, and wish to publicize what fortune has given them. They talk about their good fortune in the belief that that will bring them honor. Small-mindedness is more opposed to high-mindedness than vanity is, for it occurs more frequently and is worse. Thus, as we have said, high-mindedness is concerned with high honors. Section 4. Ambition and lack of ambition as the extremes of a nameless virtue. There seems to be a virtue also in the sphere of honor, which, as we stated when we first broached the subject, is believed to be as closely related to the high-mindedness as generosity is to magnificence. Neither this virtue nor generosity operates on a grand scale, and both give us the proper disposition in matters of moderate or small importance. Just as there is a mean, an excess, and a deficiency in taking and in giving material goods, so too can we desire honor more than we should and less than we should, and from the right source and in the right manner. We blame an ambitious man for striving for honor more than he should for trying to get it from the wrong sources. And we blame an unambitious man for deliberately desiring not to be honored, even for noble achievements. However, occasionally we praise the ambitious as manly and as the fond of what is noble, and the unambitious as moderate and self-controlled, as we said when we first discussed the subject. But since fond of something is clearly used in more senses than one, we do not always apply the term fond of honor or ambitious to the same thing. As a term of praise, it means fonder of honor than most people, and as a term of blame, fonder of honor than one ought to be. As there is no name for the mean, the extremes dispute for its possession, as for an unclaimed inheritance, as it were. But where there is excess and deficiency, there is also a median. Men desire honor both more than they should and less. Therefore, it must also be possible to desire it to the right degree. It is this characteristic which is praised, a nameless characteristic, that constitutes the mean in the sphere of honor. In comparison with ambition, it appears like a lack of ambition. In comparison with a lack of ambition, like ambition, and in comparison with both, it somehow looks like both at once. The same seems to be true also of the other virtues. But in this case, the men at the extremes are seen only in their opposition to one another, because the man who occupies the median position does not have a name. Section 5. Gentleness, short temper, and apathy. Gentleness is the mean in feelings of anger. Although there is no name for the person occupying the median position, and hardly even for the extremes, we apply the term gentleness to the median, despite the fact that it inclines toward the deficiency which has no name either. The excess may be called something like short temper, for the emotion is a feeling of anger, which is brought about by many different factors. Now, a man is praised for being angry under the right circumstances, and with the right people, and also in the right manner, at the right time, and for the right length of time. He may be termed gentle, since gentleness is used as a term of praise. For being gentle means to be unruffled and not to be driven by emotion, but to be angry only under such circumstances and for as long as time as reason may bid. But he seems to be more prone to going wrong in the direction of deficiency. A gentle person is forgiving rather than vindictive. The deficiency, whether it is a kind of apathy or whatever else it may be, receives the blame. For those who do not show anger at things that ought to arouse anger are regarded as fools. So too if they do not show anger in the right way, at the right time, or at the right person. Such people seem to have no feelings, not even for pain. They do not seem to rise their own defense, since they do not show anger, but to let one's own character be smeared and to put up with insults to those near and dear to him is slavish. In all these points, excess is also possible. Anger can be shown against the wrong persons, under the wrong circumstances, to an improper degree, too quickly, and for an unduly long time. Yet these factors are not all found in the same person. That would be impossible, for evil destroys even itself, and when it is presented in its entirety, it becomes unbearable. Short-tempered people are quick to be angered at the wrong people, under the wrong circumstances, and more than is right. But they get over it quickly, and that is their best quality. What happens to them is that they do not restrain their feelings of anger, but quickly as they are retaliated in an open way, and then have done with it. Choleric people are excessively quick and short-tempered about everything and on every occasion, hence their name. Sullen people are hard to appease, and their anger lasts for a long time, since they repress their passion. But once they retaliate, they are relieved, for revenge puts an end to their anger and engenders pleasure in a place of the pain. If that does not happen, they go on carrying their burden. Since it does not appear on the surface, no one reasons them out of it, and to digest one's anger in oneself takes time. Such men are very troublesome to themselves and to their closest friends. Bad-tempered, we call those who show anger under the wrong circumstances, to an improper degree, and for too long a time, and those who cannot be reconciled without exacting the revenge or punishment. We regard the excess as more opposed to gentleness than the deficiency. In the first place, it is much more common, for it is more human to seek revenge. Secondly, bad-tempered people are worse to live with. Our present discussion corroborates the point we made earlier. It is not easier to determine in what manner, with what person, on what occasion, and for how long a time one ought to be angry, and at what point the right action ends and wrong action begins. We do not blame a man for straying a little either toward more or toward the less. Sometimes we praise those who are deficient in anger and call them gentle, and sometimes we praise the angry as manly and regard them as capable of ruling. Therefore, it is not easy to give a formula how far and in what manner a man stray before he deserves blame, for the decision depends on the particular circumstances and on our moral sense. But this as much is clear. What deserves praise is the median characteristic that makes us show anger at the right people, on the right occasions, in the right manner, and so forth. While the extremes and deficiencies deserve blame, slight blame for the small deviations, more blame for the greater deviations, and very severe blame for very great deviations. Thus, it is clear that we must hold fast to the median characteristic. So much for the characteristics concerned with feelings of anger. Section 6. Friendliness, obsequiousness, and grouchiness. Leave its friendliness, obsequiousness, and grouchiness. Social relations, in living together, and in associating with our fellow men in conversation and business, there are people whom we regard as obsequious. They praise you just to give you the pleasure, never object to anything, and think that they must avoid giving pain to those who they meet. Their opposites who object to everything without caring in the least whether they give pain are called grouchy and quarrelsome. That the characteristics just described deserve blame is clear enough, and so the fact that the middle position between them deserves praise, i.e., the position of a man who will put up with and likewise refuse to put up with the right things in the right manner. No name has been given to this characteristic, but it bears the greatest resemblance to friendship. For a man who conforms to the intermediate characteristic is the kind of person we mean when we speak of a good friend, though friend also involves affection. This characteristic differs from friendship in that it involves no emotion or affection for those with whom one associates. It is not because of his feeling of friendship or hatred that such a man takes everything the right way, but because he is the kind of man he is. His behavior will be the same toward those who he knows and those he does not, toward people with whom he is familiar and people with whom he is not, except that in each particular case his behavior will be appropriate to the person. For it is not proper to show the same consideration to familiar people and to strangers, nor again to be equally concerned to avoid giving them pain. We have stated in general terms that his behavior in society will be as it ought to be, but further in aiming to avoid giving pain or contribute to pleasure, he will act by the standard of what is noble and beneficial. For his concern seems to be with the pleasures and pains that are found in social relations. Wherever it is not noble or harmful for him to contribute to the pleasures of others, he will refuse and will prefer to give pain by his refusal, and when an action will bring considerable discredit or harm upon the agent, he will not acquiesce in it but refuse. If his own opposition to it will cause only a small amount of pain, he will behave differently toward eminent men and toward ordinary people, toward those he knows well and those he knows less well, and he will observe other similar distinctions in his behavior, paying the proper tribute to each. Everything else being equal, he will choose to contribute to the pleasures of others, and scrupulously avoid giving pain. But he will guide his behavior by considering whether the consequences are of the greater moment, i.e., by considering what is noble and beneficial. Moreover, he will inflict small pain in order to gain great pleasure in the future. Such is the man in the median position, but there is no name for him. A man who contributes to the pleasures of others is obsequious if he has no ulterior motive and simply aims at being pleasant. But if his purpose is to gain some material advantage for himself in the form of money or what money can buy, he is a flatterer. A man who refuses to put up with anything, as we said, grouchy and quarrelsome. The extremes appear to be only opposed to one another because there is no name for the middle. Section 7. Truthfulness, boastfulness, and self-depreciation. In almost the same sphere, we find the mean, also nameless, of which boastfulness is an extreme, but it is not a bad idea to discuss nameless virtues too. For if we go through them one by one, we shall gain a greater knowledge of the factors involved in character and confirm our belief that the virtues are means. If our survey shows that this is true in every instance, now we've already discussed those people who in social life give pleasure and pain to their fellow men. Let us now speak about those who are truthful and those who are false in speech and action as well as in pretense. A man who is regarded as boastful pretends to qualities that carry high prestige, though he does not possess them, or to greater qualities than he possesses. A self-depreciator, on the contrary, disclaims or belittles the qualities he possesses, while the man in the medium position is the kind that calls everything by its proper name. He is truthful in his life and in his speech. He admits to the qualities he possesses and neither exaggerates nor underestimates them. Now, each of these lines of behavior may be pursued with or without an ulterior motive. When an individual has no ulterior motive, he speaks, acts, and lives in his real character. Falsehood is base in its own right and deserves blame, but truthfulness is noble and deserves praise. In the same way, a truthful man occupying the medium position deserves praise, while untruthful persons of either type, but especially the boastful, deserve blame. Let us discuss them both, starting with the truthful man. We are not speaking of a man who is truthful in the contracts he makes or in matters relevant to injustice and justice, for that would properly belong to another virtue. But we are speaking of a man who, when no question of this kind is involved, is truthful in his speech and his life simply because it is part of his character to be that kind of man. Such a man would seem to be honest. For a man who loves truth and who is truthful when nothing is at stake will be even more truthful when something is at stake. He will scrupulously avoid falsehood as being base, especially since he has always been scrupulous to avoid it when no other considerations were involved. Such a man deserves praise. He is more inclined to understating the truth. That is clearly in better taste, since exaggeration is obnoxious. A man who pretends to greater qualities than he possesses with no ulterior motive is a vile sort of person, else he would not take delight in falsehood. But he is evidently inept rather than wicked. But if his pretensions have reputation and honor as an ulterior motive, he does not deserve too much blame, considering that he is a boaster. But if his motive is money or something that will get him money, he shows a greater lack of propriety. It is not the capacity that makes a boaster, but the moral choice. His characteristic and the kind of person he is mark him as boastful. Similarly, one man is a liar because he enjoys lying as such, and another because he desires reputation or profit. Accordingly, people who boast in order to gain reputation pretend to qualities for which a man is praised or regarded as happy, while those who boast for profit pretend to qualities which benefit their neighbors or to accomplishments which they do not have but can claim to have without fear of being detected, e.g., proficiency as a soothsayer, a scholar, or physician. That is why most people indulge in this kind of pretense and boast, for they do not have qualifications just mentioned. Those who depreciate themselves by understatement are evidently more subtle in character, for it seems their speech is not motivated by profit, but by the concern to avoid bombast. They disclaim especially those qualities which are highly valued by others, as Socrates used to do. When they disclaimed insignificant and obvious qualities, they are called humbugs, and are more contemptible. Sometimes this is obvious boastfulness, as for example Spartan dress. In fact, both excess and exaggerated deficiency tend to be boastful. But people who make moderate use of self-depreciation and understate such of their own qualities are not too noticeable and obvious strike one as cultivated. It is the boastful man who is evidently the opposite of the truthful man because he is inferior to the self-depreciator. Section 8. Wittiness, buffoonery, and boorishness. Since relaxation is also an essential part of life, and since it includes spending one's time in amusement, it seems possible here too to display good taste in our social relations and propriety in what we say and how we say it. The same is also true of listening. It will make a difference in what kind of company we speak and to what company we listen. Clearly, in this field too, it is possible to exceed and fall short of the median. People who exceed in being funny are regarded as buffoons and as crude. They try to be funny at any cost, and their aim is more to raise a laugh than to speak with decorum and without giving pain to the butt of their jokes. Those who cannot say anything funny themselves and take offense when others do so are considered to be boorish and dour. Those who fun remains in good taste are called witty, implying quick versatility in their wits. For such sallies are believed to be movements of the character, and like bodies, characters too are judged by the way they move. But since one need not to go far afield to find something to laugh about, and since most people enjoy fun and joking more than they should, even buffoons often pass as cultivated and are called witty, but that there is a difference, and a considerable difference at that, is clear from our discussion. Tact is also a quality that belongs to the median characteristic, and a man is tactful who says and listens to the sort of things that befits an honest and free man. For there are some things that are proper for such a man to say and to hear by way of jest. There is a difference between the jesting of a free and that of a slavish man, and between that of an educated and of an uneducated person. This difference can also be seen in old and in modern comedy. For the writers of old comedy, the ridiculous element was obscenity, while the moderns tend toward innuendo. The difference in propriety between the two is quite considerable. Can we then define a good jester as a man who says nothing that is improper for a free man, or as a man who will not give pain, or even as one who will give joy to his listener? Surely that sort of thing is undefinable, for different things are hateful and pleasant to different people. The kind of jokes he will tell will also be the kind of jokes that he will hear. For what jokes a person can endure to listen to also seem to be the jokes that he makes. But he will draw a line somewhere, for a jest at the expense of a person is a kind of slander, and for some things, lawgivers forbid us to slander people. Perhaps they should also forbid us to make fun of some things. A cultivated and free man, then, will have this kind of attitude, being, as it were, a law unto himself. Thus he occupies the medium position, whether we call him tactful or witty. A buffoon, however, cannot resist any temptation to be funny, and spares neither himself nor others for a laugh. He says things that no cultivated man would say, and some that he would not even listen to. A boor, on the other hand, is useless in social relations of this kind. He contributes nothing and takes offense at everything, despite the fact that relaxation and amusement are a necessary part of life. As we have seen, the means we have described are three in number and are all concerned with human relations and speech and in action. The difference between them is that one mean concerns truthfulness and the other two pleasantness. Of the latter, one is found in amusement and the other in social relations in life in general. Section 9. Shame and shamelessness. It is incorrect to speak of a sense of shame as being a virtue or excellence, for it resembles an emotion more than a characteristic. At any rate, it is defined as a kind of fear of disrepute, and the effect it produces is very much like that produced by fear of danger. People blush when they feel ashamed and turn pale when they fear death. Both these phenomena are, of course, in the sense physical, and that is held to be more typical of emotions than of characteristics. The emotion of shame does not befit every stage of life, but only youth. For we think that young people ought to be bashful, because living by their emotions as they do, they often go wrong, and then shame inhibits them. We praise young people who have a sense of shame, but no one who would praise an elderly man for being bashful, for we think he ought not to do anything that will bring him shame. In fact, shame is not the mark of a decent man at all, since it is a consequence of base actions. Now, base actions should not be performed, regardless of whether they're really disgraceful or whether people merely think they are. In either case, they ought not to be performed, and as a result, a man ought not to be ashamed. But a base man is even characterized by the fact that he is the kind of person who would perform any disgraceful action. It is absurd for a man to believe himself actually to be decent, because he is the kind of person who would be ashamed if he performed such act. For shame is felt for voluntary actions, and no decent man will ever voluntarily do what is base. So it would appear that the shame is conditionally good. A decent man will feel ashamed if he were to act this way. But there is nothing conditional about the virtues. But if shamelessness, i.e., to act basely and not be ashamed of it, is base, it does not follow that it is decent for a man to act this way and then feel ashamed of it. For even moral strength is not a virtue, but a mixed kind of characteristic, as well we shall show later on. But let us now discuss justice. And that concludes Book 4.